People love strawberry shortcake because it's creamy, it's crumbly, it's juicy, it's flavorful. It hits all the texture notes. Today we're making one of my favorite summertime recipes, homemade strawberry shortcake. So satisfying and very, very simple. It's all completely from scratch. I get started with some fresh strawberries. So I'm just quartering the strawberries here. We're gonna toss them with a little bit of granulated sugar and let the two kind of mix together. The strawberries will release a little bit of their juices. And I like to do this at the beginning of the recipe so the strawberries have time to release a little bit of their juices, then we can move on to the biscuits. Strawberry shortcakes are so special because they're just one of those classic recipes that everyone kind of forgets about. But when you sit down and eat it, you're like, oh, I remember why this is so good, because it's so good. There's nothing like homemade strawberry shortcake. This recipe uses simple ingredients and comes together really quick. To the strawberry mixture, I like to add blueberries sometimes, especially during the summer holidays. It makes it a really patriotic dessert to serve at summer barbecues and summer gatherings. So I've got all of my strawberries here in the bowl. I'm gonna add a little bit of granulated sugar, about a 1/4 cup, and give it a light toss. This is a wonderful light summer dessert. It's not overly sweet. It tastes good any time of day and any time of year, but I love it best in the summertime when strawberries are in their peak season. So I'm just gonna set these aside. You can set them at room temperature or in the refrigerator. Just give the strawberries some time to release some of their juices. The journey of a blog post starts with a recipe idea from my baking bucket list. It's just in my note app on my phone, and I kind of just start working it into different dates throughout the month, and I figure out what works with what season, and I kind of build my editorial calendar that way. I've always wanted to make croissants from scratch, and it's been on my baking bucket list for 10 years, and I said, this would be a really good baking challenge for my readers, so I sucked it up. I started working on croissants. My mixer broke in the process, but just par for the course, and now my readers are making croissants, and they said they've never thought they would be able to do it. And we can get started on the homemade biscuits. It sounds a little scary, but I promise homemade biscuits are very, very simple. I'm starting with 3 cups of just all-purpose flour, and I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of sugar. These are sweeter biscuits, so it's great for strawberry shortcake, and baking powder. Now 2 tablespoons of baking powder, it seems like a lot of baking powder, but you want the biscuits to have a nice tall rise. And 1 teaspoon of salt. And just give it a light whisk. And I'm gonna add the cubed butter next. I'm just using unsalted butter. Again, I like to control the amount of salt in this recipe, so I always keep it in the fridge. And this is 3/4 cup of really cold cubed butter. And I'm gonna mix it together by hand with my pastry cutter. You can use a pastry cutter or you can use a food processor, whatever's easier for you. I'm gonna use my pastry cutter today because sometimes I really like to get in there and have a good feel for the dough with my hands. This is how my mother did it. This is how my grandmother did it. This is how I do it. This is how I'm gonna teach my daughter to do it, completely from scratch by hand. Just seeing the satisfaction on everyone's faces when they bite into it, like, oh my gosh, I've never had anything like this before. It's so good, and it's like a basic chocolate chip cookie, but you made it from scratch, so it tastes better than anything they've had before. Or like an apple pie, it wasn't frozen before you bit into it. You can totally tell the difference, and when everyone starts eating it, like, oh my gosh, I've never had anything better. It just makes you feel so good inside. And of course, you get to taste it too. It's important for the ingredients to be extremely cold when you make biscuits. Otherwise, your biscuits could flatten out. They won't rise as beautifully. So sometimes I even start with really cold flour. I'll just stick the flour in the freezer for 30 minutes before I begin. That extra cold flour just gives us a little bit of extra insurance to ensure a nice tall biscuit. So I'm just kind of working this with my pastry cutter. I'm giving it light twists, and I'm kind of looking for a nice pea-sized crumb. The butter is gonna be nice and coated with the flour. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you can get in there with a fork. You could even do it with your hands. I just love my pastry cutter. It's what I use when I make pie crust. The flour is nice and moistened. I have nice coarse pea-sized crumbs. Now we're moving on to the buttermilk. I can't emphasize enough that you want really, really cold ingredients when you're making biscuits. Cold buttermilk is a must. My biscuit recipe uses buttermilk, but if you don't keep buttermilk on hand, you can use like a DIY sour milk instead, just some whole milk with either white vinegar or lemon juice. Just give it a nice little stir. The biscuit mixture, when it's coming together, it's gonna be really flaky, but that's when you know you're gonna have a really flaky biscuit. If your dough seems a little too dry, you can add another teaspoon or two of buttermilk. If your dough seems a little bit too wet, just have some flour on hand and work it into the dough. I like working with a nice big bowl here. It gives us lots of room as things fly out of the bowl. Now you're gonna get a little messy. All delicious recipes are messy. So just work it all together. We're gonna bring it into a ball and then we're gonna flatten it out on the counter. I'm a self-taught baker, and everything that I've put on my blog, I've either learned from my mom or my grandmom, or just from trial and error, or from studying. I've never gone to pastry school or anything like that, maybe one day, but right now what you see on my blog is just what I've been able to learn through the process. And I think that a lot of my readers identify with that because, you know, they haven't gone to pastry school. They're just learning in the kitchen, kind of like I am, and it just makes me really proud that I can be their mentor. I'm just kind of gently working this dough. Now just use your hands. You don't need a rolling pin or anything. I'm flattening it out until it's about a ½ inch thick. If you overwork your biscuit mixture, you're gonna end up with really dense, flat biscuits. So make sure you just always handle it with care. Don't overwork it too much. Less is more. The biscuits taste wonderful fresh out of the oven, but you can also make them ahead of time and just store them at room temperature. And I'm gonna use a 3-inch biscuit cutter. Always lightly flour your biscuit cutter and work on a nice lightly floured surface. And when you're cutting the biscuits, just press down into the biscuit dough. Don't twist them. Twisting them can cut them off from rising nicely in the oven. So just a nice firm press down into the dough. You'll get about 10 to 12 biscuits from this recipe, and just keep reworking the scraps of dough until you have about 10 to 12 biscuits. I love these biscuits. They're just so simple to make and they just taste so much more special than anything you get from a can or a box. Just clear your workspace a little bit, make room for your skillet. I like to use a cast iron skillet. It helps the biscuits have a nice crispy bottom crust. If you don't have a cast iron skillet, that's completely fine. You can use just any oven-safe skillet, or you can use just a regular baking sheet. Just line it with parchment paper or a silicone baking mat and you'll be good to go. But if you bake them on a baking pan, make sure you squeeze them all together because when they're all close together, they help each other rise up. They kind of work as a team. But that's what makes biscuits rise really tall. My skillet is pre-seasoned. If your skillet isn't pre-seasoned, just give it a little coat with butter so the biscuits don't stick. I like to give them a little brush with either heavy cream or buttermilk. I just use buttermilk because it's what I used in the biscuit recipe itself. It gives them a little extra shine in the oven, helps them become a nice golden brown. And then for a little extra sparkle or crunch, I always add a little bit of coarse sugar on top. I have my oven preheated to 425. These biscuits will take about 15-16 minutes until they're nice and golden brown. Who can say that they have a job where they've been connected to people who share their interests all over the world? Like, it's so special. Food and baking has brought us together. I love sharing the ups, the downs. Hey, what went wrong? What went right? And here's why. So you don't have to make the same mistake I did. I mean, I'm still learning too. I'm not a pro. They can learn from what I've learned in the kitchen so they can have recipe success. It's so humbling to see my recipes on people's dinner tables, or let's be real, dessert tables. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I'm gonna get started on the whipped cream. Just 3 ingredients, 3 minutes, that's all you need. The heavy cream's in the fridge. Make sure it's nice and cold. I'm just using 1 cup of heavy cream. You can use a hand mixer or a stand mixer to make your whipped cream, either works. 2 tablespoons of just regular granulated sugar, and 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. And we're gonna whip it on medium-high speed for 3 minutes. If you can reach for a can of whipped cream at the grocery store, you can make homemade whipped cream. It's so simple. You don't wanna over whip it because it's only a matter of seconds between really soft, creamy whipped cream to over whipped, curdled whipped cream. You want that sweet spot. All right, this whipped cream looks great. It's nice and fluffy. I'm gonna arrange the strawberry shortcakes. So just grab one of your biscuits. It's okay if they're still a little warm. You wanna cut it in half. We're gonna fill it with strawberries and whipped cream. A little bit of strawberry so their delicious juices can soak down into the biscuit. Dollop of whipped cream. Each part of this recipe can be made ahead of time. The biscuits can be made the day before. The whipped cream can be made the day before. The strawberries can be made the day before. So when you're ready to serve them, all you have to do is just grab everything out of the fridge and assemble. Strawberry shortcakes are great for the summertime. Lots of fresh, delicious flavors. Everyone can kind of assemble their own. It's easy, it's breezy, just like the summer. What's fun is to serve it as sort of a do-it-yourself shortcake bar. You can have a lot of fun with these base components. You can flavor your whipped cream with vanilla or almond extract, or even add different berries like raspberries or blueberries. Everyone can kind of build their own strawberry shortcake. Strawberry shortcake is a great dessert for summer. It's light, it's effortless, it just tastes so good on those summer nights. Bon appetit!